Hi guys, this is Connie, back for some more Connie Reads. I want to apologize for not doing and posting this one sooner. I know a lot of people were like, I want to hear what's next. I do too, but I just didn't. So we're almost halfway through the book doing chapter 11. So here we go. Before his eyes opened, there was light through the eyelids, bright light, but they didn't want to open and focus. He tasted things, smelled things. Something was burned. There was the stink of something burned. Hair. Burned hair. It smelled awful. He opened his eyes wide, blinked, forced them to work, and saw that he was on his back, looking at the stone-layered ceiling of the overhang. It was daylight, broad daylight, and he wondered why it was that he would be lying on his back on the dirt, looking at the ceiling in the middle of the day. Then he remembered parts of it. The sound, the light, the thunder, and the slamming and cracking of it, and he was afraid. He did not know what he was afraid of at first. He was just afraid. And then, finally, he remembered Derek. It had hit him. He had seen it hit Derek. He rolled on his side. His body felt stiff, mashed into the ground, and the sudden movement made his vision blur. There! He saw Derek, or the form of Derek. He was face down on his bed, his right hand out, his left arm back and down his side. Blurred. He was all blurred and asleep. How could he be all blurred? Brian shook his head, tried to focus. Derek was still asleep. How strange, Brian thought. How strange that Derek would still be asleep in the bright daylight. And he knew then that Derek was not sleeping, but did not want to think of the other thing. Let's reason it out, he thought, his mind as blurred as his vision. Reason it all out. Derek was reaching for the radio and briefcase, and the lightning hit the tree next to the shelter and came down the tree and across the air and into Derek, and he fell. No, he was still asleep. He wasn't that other thing, not that other word. But Brian's eyes began to clear then, and saw that Derek was lying with his head to the side, and it was facing Brian, and the eyes weren't closed. They were open. He was on his side, not moving, and his eyes were open, and Brian thought how strange it was that he would sleep that way, mashed on his stomach. He knew Derek wasn't sleeping. He knew. No! He couldn't be. Couldn't be. Dead. Not Derek. Finally, he accepted it. Brian rose to his hands and knees, stiff and with great slowness, and crawled across the floor of the shelter to where Derek lay. The large man lay on his stomach as he dropped, his head turned to the left. His eyes were not fully open, but partially lidded, and the pupils stared blankly, unfocused toward the back of the shelter. Brian touched his cheek. He remembered how when the pilot had too many hads in there. He remembered how when the pilot had his heart attack, he had felt cool. The dead skin had felt cool. Derek's skin did not have the coolness. It felt warm, and Brian kneeled next to him and saw that he was breathing. Tiny little breaths, his chest barely rising and falling, but he was breathing. The air was going in and out, and he was not the other word. Not dead. And Brian leaned over him. Derek? There was no answer, no indication that Derek had heard him. Derek, can you hear anything I'm saying? Still no sign, no movement. So Brian thought, so he's what? He's knocked out? He got hit and he's knocked out, and if I wait and make him comfortable, he'll come out of it? That was it. Just knocked out. Derek's head looked twisted at an uncomfortable angle, and Brian moved Derek's body onto its side and set his head. The neck felt rubbery and loose on his rolled-up jacket for a pillow. As he did, he saw the briefcase and radio. The radio. There it was, right there on the briefcase. And if there was ever a need for it, it was now. He picked it up, turned the switch on. Katie 1, this is Katie 2. Over. His mother's name. It was a small thing, a way to include his mother. They used her name as a call sign, and Derek had shown Brian how to use the radio, the correct procedure in case of an emergency. Like now. Katie 1, this is Katie 2. Over. Nothing. He turned the squelch control down and listened for the hiss of static. But there was nothing. Not even a noise. Again. Katie 1, this is Katie 2. Over. Dead air. He saw, then, that next to where the antenna came out of the case, there was a small discolored spot on the plastic. It was a burn mark. The radio was made to be used outdoors, tough, with a weatherproof case around it. And when he opened the outside case, he saw that the lightning had hit the radio as well as Derek and him. There was a jagged line burned in the plastic on the back, and even without opening the case and seeing the inside, he knew the radio was blown. What to do? Think. He couldn't think right. He put the radio down and turned back to Derek. There was no change at all. No movement except for the short rise and fall of his chest with his breathing. The eyes were still partially open, as they had been. Think. What did he know that could help? Lightning had hit the tree next to the overhang, come down the side. He saw where the pine bark was burned and literally blown from the tree, and then must have come out on a root, or jumped away from the tree somehow. No, that wasn't right. He'd read somewhere that lightning struck up, not down, moved from the ground up. Somehow it had come from the ground, through Derek and the radio and him to the tree, and then up, except that it seemed to come down, and Derek shouldn't have reached out, shouldn't have risen. He shook his head. Stupid. None of that mattered. Electrical shock. What did you do when there was an electrical shock? CPR. To get them breathing again, you had to give them CPR. Except that Derek was breathing already. Heart. He should check the heart. He put his fingers on Derek's wrist, but he couldn't find the pulse. But when he checked his own, he couldn't find that either. He put his ear to Derek's chest and heard the heart thumping. He tried to time it, but couldn't transpose the number of beats per minute measured on his digital watch into a pulse rate because he couldn't think. Think. The lightning came, took the tree, then Derek, the radio, him, and they were all knocked down and out. There it was. Maybe Derek was just knocked out and would come to in a little while. Somehow he knew that wasn't true. Something in the way Derek looked made the condition look like more than just being knocked out. Yet Brian wanted it to be so much that he forced himself to believe it. Derek was breathing evenly, short breaths, but even, and his heart was beating regularly. He was just knocked out. Brian would make him comfortable and then wait next to him. Wait for him to come to. He would wait. And that's the end of chapter 11. Holy cow. Yikes. Alright, well, be careful with that and enjoy, please and thank you. And we are almost at the halfway point of this book. So, with the next installment, we'll find out what happens. Bye.